Everyone, and good morning in the US, and good evening to everyone in London. I will be presenting today on the topic of historical transformation of Eugene's urban morphology. I am Sudhik Shrestha, uh, a fourth year PhD candidate at the University of Oregon, US. To begin with, Eugene is a mid sized American city located in the state of Oregon near the west coast. Eugene has a neighboring city as well, Springfield to its east. It has a total area of around 50 square miles and it has a population of around 170,000, making it the second largest city in Oregon after Portland, which has a population of actually more than 650,000. So Eugene was officially established by the settlers moving west in around 1853. Uh, Although it was settled like almost a decade before. So the image on the left shows the built fabric of the city at present and the major arterials. This is going to be important as we move forward. So this is for the present. My research is about the urban morphological transformation of a mid-sized American city, like I said, and across its entire history from the 1850s to the present. I want to add that the present will be represented by the years 2010 and 2018 interchangeably, as the sources were available, right? So either 2010 or 2018, I'm trying to represent the present with those years. Additionally, my research also uses space syntax, which is not as popular here in the U.S. as it is in Europe, Asia, and South America. So it gave me an opportunity to explore an American city as well, like through space syntax. So just briefly, space syntax is an architecture and urban theory initially developed in the 1970s and further in the 1980s with the publication of Social Logic of Space and by Bill Hillier and Julian Hansen. So it actually originated from London, actually, and it fundamentally contains that the social knowledge of any urban society is inherently embedded within its spatial networks. Or the network of streets, open spaces, and built forms. Furthermore, in regard to the urban street network, the theory argues that the structure of the urban grid and the land use distribution as are related to each other, all governed by their movement potential or syntactic values. So this is an iconic space syntax map of London, which shows the Oxford Street. I've not been to London myself, but this is the London street that was picked up by the map, and it's red in color. So an iconic map of London. Space syntax map of London. So, in the past, several studies have been conducted about cities in the US using space syntax. Some notable authors include Mark Major, who recently published a whole book on the American grid, John Peponis at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and Sophia Sara, I hope I'm pronouncing those names properly, at UCL. So, however, I came to realize after studying for a couple of years, studying space syntax for a couple of years, that space syntax study of one particular city in the US, either exclusively or in relation to the socioeconomic forces and history across its entire history, was missing. So through this presentation, I'm sharing a part of my study, although not all of it, regarding Eugene's urban morphology and yeah, that's what I wanted to say as background. So the major question that I'm asking, and I don't want this presentation actually to be just about this scientific kind of process of asking a question, having a hypothesis, and then checking whether or not the question, whether or not I find the answer. But just to frame my presentation properly, the question is, as Eugene transformed between 1850s to the present, was there a correlationship between the street network configuration and business city patterns, or did the city street network configuration influence the location of businesses? So there are two ways I'm trying to verify the relationship through observation, right? Qualitatively through the observation of maps, which is entirely subjective, and two, also a computation of the transformation and the relationship and correlation statistically. So the major aim of this research is to compute the relationship between the two variables as the city grew. To achieve this, I will first compute the transformation of the street network by using space syntax, and then the transformation of the business pattern or numbers along the streets by using city directories for the respective years. This will comprise the core research. Whereas the background, I'm going from the third step to the first step here. Anyway, so additionally, since the street configuration and business patterns may not present a complete story of the transformation, I will also talk about using physical transformation briefly in terms of population size and street morphology, along with an explanation of the major events that occurred in the respective periods. And this will comprise the background research. So moving ahead, the background research has two parts, physical and morphological transformation and urban history along each period. A few notes on the historical periods and the years I've studied. Although I will discuss the major events related to its urban development that took place along Eugene's history, I do not intend to demonstrate a causal relationship. By this I mean I'm not trying to prove this change across its history led to this change in the urban morphology or in the business pattern, right? So rather one big takeaway would be that the ambitions of the city and the structure changed drastically as it moved forward or progressed forward along the 19th and 20th century, right? So the years I've studied for the spatial and business pattern analysis are 1856, 1890, 1930, 1970, and 2010 and 18. So I've studied these, I chose these years uh, to represent each historic period, which I'm going to talk about. So first, on the physical and morphological transformation, how did Eugene grow and what was the growth like? Physically, between the 1850s and the present, Eugene grew from a small town you can see here, of a few hundred people to a mid-sized city of around 170,000, right? And like most other US cities, the exponential growth occurred in the decades of the 1960s and the 1970s. So in the 2 decades alone, its population grew from around 50,000, as you can see here, the steep curve, from around 51,000 to more than 105,000. And at present, it's at 170,000, right? So it was already 105,000 40 years ago. Also, its occupied area increased from 15 square miles in 1960 to 35 square miles in 1980, thanks to the rapid annexation. So here in this map, you can see how it grew, right? In the first post-war decade, right, it exploded from this size to occupying a large, like almost the size of its present size by 1970s and 80s. In terms of its street morphology, the number of street segments grew from like a few hundred thousand, a few hundred to more than 23,000 in the 2000 at present. The mean segment length, which has not changed drastically, and segment length meaning the each segment or each street line between two intersections had not changed till the 1970s, but it it like reduced drastically to less than 60 meters at present, right? So uh, probably because of the peripheral, you can see here on the edges peripheral, and this is the core, right? Core, like till 1980, everything was 1890, everything was the core, and it became to like kind of evolve in the 20th century. So one thing I wanted to stress is that the circles in the 1970 and the 2018 maps are the intersection of Willamette and Broadway, which is considered as the popular center. Like every city has a popular center, right? And it is the core of downtown, the Willamette and Broadway intersection, indicated by this red circle. Um, So next is major developments across history. I'm trying to find potential reasons for transformation. So I divided the entire history of Eugene into major periods, 1850s to into these four major periods. The first period is represented by the establishment of commercial areas, right, and slow development, right, beginning to make its presence felt. The second period was marked by the city's ambition for economic independence and construction of major highways and widespread use of the automobile. The third period, the first post-war decades, represented Eugene's aim to become a major regional center, and it experienced massive growth, as I kind of talked about. And several citywide and metropolitan scale projects were implemented as well. The fourth period, or the decades after the 1980s, have been characterized by a realization of the aftermath of the post-war years. I'm going to move a bit quickly now. So the core research, and now I'm entering into the core research, right, to trying to find what I aim to. Originally. So the core research consists of three steps: spatial or syntactic transformation, business patterns, and relationship between one and two. This kind of like the same thing, space syntax research tools that I've used, and like the research process, which will be made even more clear as I move along. So this is what I've done. Like, so this map is like in the background. The street network represents a space syntax map, which I'm going to talk about, and each of the dots represent the businesses along that street. So what I've done is I've counted the number of businesses along each street, and for each street segment, the space syntax software automatically calculates its values, and each map has its own like significance, which I'm going to talk about now. Sorry. So before I begin, so there's two variables I've used. Dependent variable would be the location of the businesses, like these dots, and I'm arguing that the independent variable would be the explanatory variable would be the syntax values, right, which are integration and choice. So next, I'm going to present the space syntax maps of Eugene along the decades, and the question I'm asking is how did this space index measures for Eugene transform, and is there a noticeable pattern? So as you look at these images, I'm just going to briefly talk about what each of them means. So by definition, choice recognizes, and this is the choice map, recognizes streets that have the highest potential to be used as pass-through or for through movement or efficient route choice for vehicles. Mathematically, it is a calculation of the number of sorted paths overlaps between all nodes in the graph. So choice denotes urban movement hierarchy through the street networks, or in other words, major streets connecting important land uses, right? So the five maps, so choice values for the 5 years. For the pre-war years, which would be the 3 years, 1800s and till 1930 or till 1945 actually. The Broadway intersection, by 1930, the Broadway and Willamette intersection, as you can see here, has become the location of citywide movement in both horizontal and vertical directions. By 1970, the city has grown enormously, and the hierarchy of major arterials, as this map is supposed to show, and as this is showing, is clearly visible. By 2018, not much has changed, except that the residential areas between the major streets have grown. So this is a 1970 map of how the developments. So this is a 1970 map on the left of how the highway developments took place, and the map on the right is supposed to kind of show whether or not there is a relationship. And from visual assessment, all we can do for this is visually assess there is a correlation, like between how the major highways that was constructed in the 60s and the most important streets according to the automatic space index analysis, right?
Minutes, Civic.
So before I These graphs show the transformation of choice values, and we can see in the box plot how it has reduced over the years. Uh, Next is integration, and so by definition, integration shows the sheets that are destinations in themselves. And so 19, so if you look at the 1970 map, it represents one of the first years after the completion of the highway system, as I talked about before, and it's formed a major integration core, which is sustained in the present as well. So the main idea now is to see if the business patterns and the integration values have a correlation as or not. So by definition, the correlation would exist between integration values and the business city location, because integration shows the destination streets and choice, whereas choice just shows the streets that you would travel through, right? So I'm just correlated integration values and the business locations. Again, the graph and box plot for integration values is considerably decreased. In summary, um, what I'd like to say is that the values of integration and choice decreased considerably after the war, whereas the values like synergy in yellow and intelligibility in blue have remained same. So what synergy and intelligibility mean in brief is that the degree to which the internal or local structure of an area is related to the to the city scale has been maintained, whereas intelligibility shows how much the local could be, how much the global or the city scale could be understood from the local or from the parts. Business city patterns, I'm gonna quickly go move through this, and gonna show. So this map shows the intensity of business considerations by counting the total businesses along each street segment using the city directories. Just before that, so the categories I've included in the maps include retail, service, industrial, institutional. 600 businesses for 1930, 1500 businesses for 1970, and 2400 businesses for 2018. So these calculations show that the blue circles in the 1970 map show that the neighborhood and regional centers outside the city core were present. So this is the city core, whereas there were smaller centers, regional and neighborhood centers developing around as well. Whereas the 2018 map shows the new centers that were not present in 1970. So the city was constantly evolving, and three specific types of centers or business centers were present, which were the downtown, regional center, and neighborhood centers. So is there a visual and statistical correlation between space index and business patterns? The main core of my research. So first, so the idea is that these black solid lines would represent the streets with highest integration values, and by theory, these lines would have concentration of businesses. So the nature of the graph is the map is so that it's like all qualitative assessment. So it's for us to look and see if there's a correlation. I would say there is, right? As you can see, the businesses are like concentrated along the main streets or the thick lines. Same is true for year 1970, the downtown core for year 1970, and similarly for 2018, the core is populated with businesses, and the main streets are populated with businesses as well. Whereas if you can see it in the 1 mile area blow up image, the streets with low integration values don't have as much business like concentration. So visually there is a relationship, and statistically what happened was, so this is a scatter diagram, and this I've shown already. So previously I showed visual correlation. So statistically, through regression analysis, I wanted to see if there is a relationship or no, and there was a significant relationship as shown by the p-value of less than 0.01. So although the r-square values are less, it's not the main thing that I was trying to look at. And yeah, so this is what I found. So in the end, there was a significant relationship as the city progressed. So thank you. This is it. Yeah. So the summary had all the things that I talked about. Yeah.